In the modern world, power does not always come from size, speed, or even technology. Sometimes, power comes from control. Control over how people think, control over what they expect, control over what they believe is normal. For more than a decade, two companies have quietly fought one of the most expensive, complex, and consequential corporate wars in modern history. A war that reshaped global supply chains, rewrote intellectual property law, altered consumer behavior, and redefined what innovation actually means. Most people believe this story is simple. They believe Apple is the visionary, the company that invents the future. They believe Samsung is the fast follower, the manufacturer that copies and scales. They believe one company creates and the other imitates. But that belief hides a much more uncomfortable truth, because beneath the headlines, beneath the lawsuits, beneath the commercials and keynote stages, this war was never really about smartphones. It was about who controls the rules of modern capitalism. It was about whether design or manufacturing would dominate, whether ecosystems could overpower hardware, whether creativity could defeat scale, or whether scale would quietly absorb creativity. And most importantly, it was about whether winning in business means being first or being everywhere. The answer to that question reshaped a trillion-dollar industry. And by the end of this story, the company you think won may not be the one that actually did. To understand the Apple-Samsung war, you first have to understand the moment that made it inevitable. In the early 2000s, the mobile phone industry looked nothing like it does today. Phones were utilitarian tools. They made calls, they sent texts, they flipped open, they snapped shut. The dominant players weren't Silicon Valley dreamers, they were industrial giants. Nokia ruled global market share, Motorola owned the American consumer. BlackBerry controlled corporate communication. Innovation was incremental. Screens got slightly bigger. Batteries lasted a little longer. Keyboards became marginally better. No one believed the phone would become the most important personal object in human history. At the same time, two very different companies were quietly preparing for a collision. Apple, a California design company reborn under Steve Jobs, was obsessed with experience, emotion, and control. Apple didn't want to compete in existing categories. It wanted to redefine them. Samsung, a South Korean industrial empire, was obsessed with scale, speed, and vertical integration. Samsung didn't wait for categories to be redefined. It entered every category and optimized relentlessly. These two companies did not just have different strategies. They had opposing philosophies of capitalism. Apple believed value comes from focus. Samsung believed value comes from breadth. Apple believed fewer products, perfectly designed, could dominate minds. Samsung believed more products, rapidly improved, could dominate markets. For years, these philosophies never collided. Then came the smartphone, and everything broke. Apple's smother story begins with near death. In 1997, the company was weeks away from bankruptcy. Its product line was chaotic. Its market relevance was fading. Steve Jobs returned not as a visionary dreamer, but as a ruthless simplifier. He cut products. He centralized decisions. He believed something radical. Consumers don't know what they want until you show them. That belief shaped everything Apple would become. Apple didn't license its software. It didn't open its ecosystem. It didn't chase market share. It chased influence. The iMac proved design could revive a company. The iPod proved hardware and software together could dominate an industry. The iTunes Store proved ecosystems could lock users in 4 years. By the mid-2000s, Apple wasn't just making products. It was shaping consumer expectations. But Apple had a problem. Its most successful product, the iPod, was doomed. Phones were eating music players' Jobs. And he made a decision that terrified his own team. Apple would destroy its own product before someone else did. Samsung's story begins far from Silicon Valley. In 1938, Korea Samsung was not a tech startup. It was a survival machine. Over decades, it became a chaebol, a massive conglomerate spanning electronics, shipbuilding, construction, and semiconductors. Samsung's strength wasn't branding. It was manufacturing. By the early 2000s, Samsung made components for nearly everyone, including Apple, screens, memory, chips, processors. Samsung didn't chase emotional attachment, it chased operational dominance. Its strategy was simple but brutal. Enter every market. Fail fast. Iterate faster. Scale relentlessly. While Apple obsessed over perfection, Samsung obsessed over speed. And that difference would define the war. In 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage and quietly detonated an industry. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone, but it was the first phone designed around software. No keyboard, a full touchscreen. Gestures instead of buttons. The iPhone didn't just compete with phones. It made existing phones feel obsolete overnight. Apple wasn't chasing volume. It priced high limited carriers and controlled distribution. But something unexpected happened. Consumers didn't care. They leaned up. They waited. They paid. The iPhone didn't win because it was cheap. It won because it felt inevitable, and Samsung watched carefully. Samsung didn't panic. It analyzed. Samsung realized something Apple didn't want to admit. The iPhone was revolutionary, but not unreachable. Touchscreens could be replicated. Apps could be copied. Hardware could be improved. Samsung didn't try to out-Apple Apple. It tried to outscale Apple. In 2010, Samsung launched the Galaxy S. It ran Android, an open system backed by Google. It worked across carriers. It offered variety instead of uniformity. Samsung flooded the market. Big phones, small phones, cheap phones, premium phones. Apple offered one iPhone per year. Samsung offered dozens. This wasn't chaos. It was strategy. Samsung didn't need every phone to succeed. It needed the category to succeed, and it worked. By 2011, Apple had a problem. Samsung wasn't just competing, it was winning market share. Apple believed Samsung crossed the line. Not competition, imitation. So Apple sued Samsung across multiple countries, claiming Samsung copied the iPhone's design, interface, and user experience. Rounded corners, grid icons, swipe gestures. This wasn't just about money. It was about the ownership of ideas. Apple argued that design itself was intellectual property. Samsung argued that innovation evolves through iteration. The trials were brutal. Internal emails were exposed. Executives testified. Billions were at stake. In 2012, a US jury sided with Apple. Samsung was ordered to pay over $1 billion. The message seemed clear. Apple had won, but the war was far from over. While Apple and Samsung fought in court, something deeply ironic was happening behind the scenes. Samsung was still supplying Apple. Samsung made Apple's screens. Samsung made Apple's memory chips. Samsung made Apple's processors. Apple was suing the same company it depended on. This wasn't hypocrisy, it was necessity. Apple needed Samsung's manufacturing scale. Samsung needed Apple's orders. Their war was not binary. It was simple, and that complexity made the conflict far more dangerous. As the smartphone market matured, a pattern emerged. Samsung sold more phones. Apple made more money. Samsung dominated global value. Apple dominated margins. Apple didn't care about market share. It cared about profit concentration. In some years, Apple captured over 80% of total smartphone profits, while holding less than 20% of unit sales. Samsung, despite massive scale, operated on thinner margins. This exposed the core philosophical divide. Samsung optimized for presence. Apple optimized for power. Both were winning, but in different currencies. Samsung fought Apple in advertising. Aggressive commercials mocked iPhone users as outdated or technologically ignorant. Apple didn't respond directly. It didn't need to. Apple's silence reinforced its brand. Apple positioned itself as culture. Samsung positioned itself as technology, and culture ages slower. After years of being labeled a copycat, Samsung tried to reinvent its image. It invested heavily in design. It cleaned up its software. It premium-priced flagship devices. Some efforts worked, others didn't. The Galaxy Note 7 disaster, with its battery explosions and global recalls, exposed the downside of speed. Samsung's obsession with being first backfired. Apple watched carefully. It moved slower, but safer. At the same time, Apple faced a different problem. Critics argued Apple stopped innovating. Bigger screens arrived late. Features appeared after Android. Design changes became incremental, but Apple wasn't chasing novelty. It was chasing retention, services, subscriptions, ecosystem lock-in. Apple shifted from a product company to a platform company, and that shift changed the meaning of winning. This war is not unique. It repeats across American business history. Microsoft versus Google, Uber versus Lyft, Amazon versus everyone. The pattern is consistent. One company defines the rules. Another company exploits them at scale. Innovation creates markets. Optimization dominates them. The real lesson is uncomfortable. Innovation alone does not guarantee dominance. Scale alone does not guarantee loyalty. Power comes from control of the system. Apple controls the ecosystem. Samsung controls the supply chain. Both are forms of power, and both have limits. This was never a story about phones. It was a story about how power is built in modern capitalism. Lesson 1. Control beats speed. Fast followers can win markets, but controllers win ecosystems. Lesson 2. Profit matters more than volume. Market share impresses headlines. Margins determine survival. Lesson 3. Wars don't end. They evolve. Apple versus Samsung didn't end. It moved into services, chips, AI, and platforms. The smartphone war taught the world that success is not about being first, biggest, or loudest. It's about shaping the battlefield so others must fight on your terms. And the final question remains unanswered. In a world shifting toward artificial intelligence, wearables, and ambient computing, will design still rule? Or will manufacturing scale reclaim dominance? That question will define the next trillion-dollar war. If you found this story valuable, consider subscribing for more long-form business documentaries that go beyond headlines and uncover the hidden mechanics of power. And if you have a perspective on who truly won the Apple versus Samsung war, not emotionally, but structurally, share it in the comments. Because the most important business stories are never as simple as they seem.